George's Marvellous Medicine by Roald Dahl. We're on chapter 9, about halfway through the book, I'd say. Chapter 9. The pig, the bullocks, the sheep, the pony and the nanny goat. At that moment, George's mother came back from shopping in the village. She drove her car into the yard and got out. She was carrying a bottle of milk in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. The first thing she saw was a gigantic brown hen towering over little George. She dropped the bottle of milk. Then Grandma started shouting at her from the rooftop, and when she looked up and saw Grandma's head sticking up through the tiles, she dropped the bag of groceries.
How about that then, eh, Mary?
Grandma shouted.
I bet you never seen a hen as big as that. That's George's giant hen, that is.
But, stammered George's mother.
It's George's magic medicine, Grandma shouted. We've both of us had it, the hen and I.
But how in the world did you get up on the roof? Cried Mother.
I didn't,
cackled the old woman.
My feet are still standing on the floor in the living room.
This was just too much for George's mother to understand. She goggled and she gaped. She looked as though she was going to faint. A second later, George's father appeared. His name was Mr. Killiecranky. Mr. Cranky was a small man with bandy legs and a huge head. He was a kind father to George, but he was not an easy person to live with because even the smallest thing got him all worked up and excited. The hen standing in the yard was certainly not a small thing, and when Mr. Cranky saw it, he started jumping about as though someone was burning his feet.
Great heavens! He cried, opening his arms. What's this? What's happened? Where did it come from? It's a giant hen. Who did this?
I did, George said.
Look at me!
Grandma shouted from the rooftop.
Never mind about the hen. What about me?
Mr. Cranky looked up and saw Grandma. Shut up, Grandma, he said. It didn't seem to surprise him the old girl was sticking up through the roof. It was the hen that excited him. He had never seen anything like it. But then, who had?
It's fantastic, Mr. Cranky said, dancing round and round. It's colossal. It's gigantic. It's tremendous. It's a miracle. How did you do it, George?
George started telling his father about the magic medicine. While he was doing this, the big brown hen sat down in the middle of the yard and went cluck, 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 cluck. Everyone stared at it. When it stood up again, there was a brown egg lying there. The egg was about the size of a football.
That egg would make scrambled eggs for 20 people, Mr. Cranky said.
George, Mr. Cranky asked,
how much of this medicine have you got?
Lots, George said. There's a big saucepan full in the kitchen, and this bottle here is nearly full.
Come with me, Mr. Cranky yelled, grabbing George by the arm. Bring the medicine. For years and years I've been trying to breed bigger and bigger animals, bigger bulls for beef, bigger pigs for pork, bigger sheep for mutton.
They went to the pigsty first. George gave a spoonful of medicine to the pig. The pig blew smoke from its nose and jumped all over the place. Then it grew and grew until it was enormous. Then they went to the herd of fine black bullocks that Mr. Cranky was trying to fatten for market. George gave each of them some medicine, and they grew and grew. Then the sheep, and then he gave some to his pony, Jack Frost. Look how big they are. Finally, just for fun, he gave some to Alma, the nanny goat, and she grew and grew and grew. Look how large she is. A crane for Grandma. Grandma, from high up in the rooftop, could see everything that was going on, and she didn't like what she saw. She wanted to be the centre of attention, and no one was taking even the slightest notice of her. George and Mr. Cranky were running around getting excited about enormous animals. Mrs. Cranky was washing up in the kitchen, and Grandma was all alone in the rooftop.
Hey, you! She yelled. George! Give me a cup of tea this minute, you idle little beast!
Don't listen to the old goat, Mr. Cranky said. She's stuck where she is, and a good thing too. But we can't leave her up there, Dad, George said. What if it rains?
George! Grandma yelled. Oh, you horrible little boy! You disgusting little worm! Fetch me a cup of tea at once and a slice of currant cake.
We'll have to get her out, Dad, George said. She won't give us any peace if we don't. Mrs. Cranky came outside and she agreed with George. She is my mother, dear, she said. She's a pain in the neck, Mr. Cranky said. I don't care, Mrs. Cranky said. I'm not leaving my own mother sticking up through the roof for the rest of her life. So in the end, Mr. Cranky telephoned the crane company and asked them to send their largest crane out to the house at once. The crane arrived 1 hour later. It was on wheels and there were 2 men inside it. The crane men climbed up onto the roof and put ropes under Grandma's arms. Then she was lifted right up through the roof. In a way, the medicine had done Grandma good. It had not made her any less grumpy or bad-tempered, but it seemed to have cured all her aches and pains, and she was suddenly as frisky as a ferret. As soon as the crane had lowered her to the ground, she ran over to George's huge pony, Jack Frost, and jumped upon his back. This ancient old hag, who was now as tall as a house, then galloped about the farm on the gigantic pony, shouting, Out of my way! Clear the decks! Stand back, you miserable midgets, or I'll trample you to death! And other silly things like that. But because Grandma was much too tall to get back in the house, she had to sleep that night in the hay barn with the mice and the rats.